and welcome back to online English class. I hope you guys are doing well today. Today we're going to be starting Unit 6, which is our final unit for the course, which is going to be an extended analysis of Shakespeare's play King Lear. All right, as a reminder, your exam, the AP exam, is on May 14th, so we will be spending the next 3 weeks of the course finishing up our coursework, taking the Unit 6 test, writing the Quarter 4 essay, and working through King Lear together. And then we will spend some time reviewing for and preparing for your May 14th exam. We will take that exam, and in the course, you will have completed the course. All right. So we've got about 1 month. 1 month of hard work left before us, and then we are done. All right, so let's talk quickly about the top of the week announcements, our goals for this week before we jump into our first lecture. Obviously, today we're going to be looking at Lecture 1, which is going to introduce King Lear. It's going to be a brief lecture, but we are going to just think about why we're studying King Lear, this play particularly, and think about the cultural context, author, title, and sort of central question that's going to help guide our analysis. Then we're going to jump into OTN 1 tomorrow. That's going to be an extended analysis of Act 1. Make sure that you read this announcement right here. Your OTNs do not need to be written in formal prose for this unit. All right, they are just records of what we talk about in class, so you can jot down what you can during the lecture, annotate your text as we move through it. Then when the lecture is over, go back to the prompts quickly and make some interpretive assertions that answer the prompts. Okay, so if the prompt asks you how a particular character is developed in a certain scene or act, right, using the information from the lecture, you can just go back, answer that question directly with an interpretive assertion, and then move on. Okay, so you're not writing a whole essay or anything like that. Why? Because I want your writing to be spent on your progress checks, all right, your free response practice, and also your Quarter 4 essay, which I'm going to explain and talk through in just a moment. Okay, so obviously after we work on OTN 1, we'll be beginning OTN 2. You need to begin the progress check 7 if you're in AP literature. So what do you need to do? You need to complete progress check 6. That's due by today, which is Tuesday by 3 p.m. and then begin progress check 7. You need to reread Lear as we're working through the play together. You need to complete OTN 1 and send confirmation that you've completed it by Friday. And aside from that, you need to finish your MWE for the road, all right, and finish your Quarter 4 essay. So let's talk about what your Quarter 4 essay assignment is going to look like, all right? So, interestingly, right, I've decided to give you a very short essay assignment, 750 to 800 words. That is a short assignment. In fact, that is the length of an essay that you typically would write in one sitting in response to an AP prompt or a test prompt that you would get in a history class or a Bible class or an English class. Okay, so in the course of your education at Redeemer, you have written many essays in one sitting that are 750 to 800 words long. This is a very short essay. And the reason why I've assigned a short essay is because I want this essay to be as near to perfect as possible in its composition. All right, so grammatically perfect, organizationally perfect, in terms of the way that you've structured and introduced your textual evidence and then commented on your textual evidence in reasonable body paragraphs that are clearly unified with and linked to your thesis, as perfect as possible. Okay, so the prompt, it's a pretty simple prompt. It's a prompt that honestly all of you should be able to hack at this point, right? Analyze how Shakespeare uses literary devices to characterize the complex interior motives of King Lear in Act 1, Scene 1, lines 35 through 155. Okay, so you are going to conduct a close reading about these lines, right? And then you're going to structure that close reading into a close analysis essay, 750 to 800 words long, all right, that unpack and analyze carefully, all right, these lines, okay? So that essay should be as close to perfect as you can possibly make it, all right? Perfect introduction, perfect thesis statement, perfect body paragraphs, perfect grammar, perfect evidence selection, as perfect as you possibly can. I'll be grading this essay more rigorously than I've ever graded any other assignment because ultimately I want to see, before you leave, all right, especially for you seniors, before you leave, I want to see that you can write at the level that, at the standard, at the level, at the standard that I expect for you to be able to write at when you are leaving my English classes, okay? And those standards are summarized basically here, okay? Talks about paragraph construction, talks about thesis construction, talks about commentary and organization of line of reasoning, talks about evidence that's relevant and sufficient, and then talks about demonstrating control over the elements of composition. All right, so that is your quarter 4 essay assignment. It is the short but perfect essay challenge. All right. So we're going to be analyzing Act 1, Scene 1 as early as tomorrow. Okay, so you're going to have all kinds of resources to help you develop this this analysis. What I'm really evaluating here is your composition skill. I want to see you compose a basically perfect essay. All right, great. So let's go ahead and jump into our introductory lecture for King Lear. We're not going to dwell on this for a super long time, but I do want to spend a little bit of time with you thinking about the background of the play. All right, so as usual, before we get into the study of a piece of text, we want to conduct an SQ3R for it, looking specifically at the pre-reading phases. So everything before the 3 R's, the read, recite, and the review. Okay, so we're going to survey the play's author, cultural context, genre, and title. Okay, and that's going to lead us to a central question that's going to help us unpack the play's main idea. All right, so first, let's just talk quickly about the author. The author is obviously super famous, William Shakespeare. Okay, probably the most important writer in the Western canon, at least arguably the most important writer in the Western canon. Lived from 1564 to 1660. Now, if you're paying attention and you're not brain dead, then you should probably be thinking William Shakespeare did not live anywhere close to any of the other authors that we've been looking at through the course of this class, except for a couple poems that we looked at by like John Donne. Okay, in other words, this dude is not modern. Well, interestingly, Shakespeare lived in a period of time that most historians, especially cultural historians, refer to as the early modern period of Western history. Okay, so if you know your Western history, you know that the transition between medieval to modern began to steadily unfold after and during these periods of European history that we refer to as the Renaissance, the rebirth, the Reformation of the Christian Church, the Age of Exploration, all right, exploring previously uncharted areas of the world, specifically the Americas, and an overall steady movement away from the feudal system and feudal hierarchies, the movement away from feudal kingdoms to European nation states. These are all vital steps toward developing and building the increasingly secular industrial society that we refer to as the modern world. Okay, so Shakespeare lived in this period of transition, this period of growth, this period of change. All right, Elizabethan and Jacobean English history featured, all right, the effects of these larger European movements like the Renaissance, Reformation, exploration, and movement away from the feudal system. Okay, But all right, so in that sense, Shakespeare is modern, all right, per se. But all right, more on an ideological level, Lear itself is probably Shakespeare's most modern play, because the play is set in a pre-Christian environment, all right, in which the characters are required to find meaning in their existence apart from, and perhaps you remember this term from the first semester, grand narratives. In other words, totalizing stories that offer a cohesive understanding of a human being's part in the world, and that story binds together all people, all nations, under a similar kind of story. The most simple grand narrative that you know is called the Christian gospel. All right, uh, Marxism is another example of a grand narrative, a totalizing, universalizing structure. Okay, so Shakespeare sets this play, King Lear, in a pre-Christian environment. All right, so in ancient Britain, prior to its Christianization and prior even to its colonization by the Romans. All right, in the first century. So, in other words, the play has it's interesting because it's set so far in the ancient past. It has quite a lot of commonalities with the post-Christian modern Western cultural environment. The existentialism, the naturalism, the fragmentation of modern and postmodern culture all find a voice in this play. And so, despite the fact the play was written hundreds of years ago, it is, in fact, one of the most prominent articulations of the ideas that are at the heart of the ideas oftentimes that plague the modern thinker, the modern mind, and the modern heart. Okay? In that sense, King Lear is a very modern or even postmodern tragedy. Okay? So in other words, it's a great play to finish our study of modernity and modern and postmodern literature with. Okay? So let's talk quickly about genre and style. First, King Lear is a play. Okay? A play is just the live action story performance of a written literary text. Okay? So the piece of writing is obviously reflective. It's artful. It's serious. It bears all the marks of a serious piece of literary fiction. And then it is performed. It's not read in the quiet of one's mind like a novel or poem, but rather it is meant to be performed communally. And in that way, drama is a sort of interesting and different kind of literary expression. All right, the performance itself is actually an act of interpretation. Okay, as the plays who read their characters then enact or embody those characters in certain ways in reflection of the ways that they've interpreted the meaning that that character is meant to express. And a good actor is good at doing that. Okay, a bad actor is bad at doing that, right? Like me, I'm really bad at acting. I like to try though, it's funny. Okay, a play has an audience who participates in the action by reacting to the performance. Okay, and normally the play is unified by a kind of common theme. All right, some modern or postmodern pieces of drama don't have like a common theme, and it's like, oh, that was the theme, you know, fragmentation. Okay, whatever. All right, Shakespeare's King Lear does have a sort of common theme, an idea that is being meditated on, a subject that is being explored, and that central subject is the suffering that accompanies aging or getting old, right? So that and that's what we're going to be talking about as you finish your high school education and get older. All right. Um, Second, like all forms of narrative art, a drama has a plot. Okay, it's got a protagonist, an antagonist. Their interactions are introduced in the exposition. They rise in the rising action to a climax. After the climax, it unravels in the falling action and then resolves in a meaningful way. Okay, so in other words, unlike say a poem that doesn't necessarily have a plot, a piece of drama has a plot. Okay, like a piece of literary prose oftentimes will have a plot. Okay, so it's just got a plot. Third, this particular play uses a thing called a double plot that parallels and ties into the central narrative. Okay, in other words, the central narrative, which centers on King Lear's interactions with his daughters, Regan, Goneril, and Cordelia, okay, is doubled by or juxtaposed with Gloucester's interactions with his two sons, Edgar and Edmund. All right. When put together, those stories fuse and tie together in genius little ways because Shakespeare's cool. And also, when put together, sort of offer a kind of mosaic. All right, that illustrates the theme of the work of literature as a whole. Okay. Now, fourth, Lear employs dramatic devices called soliloquies and asides. All right, so this is a tool that is used by the dramatist much in the same way that the novelist uses an omniscient narrator. Okay, so because in drama the audience isn't able to literally read the mind of the human characters in front of them walking around and talking, all right, and acting. Uh, the dramatist uses these things, especially Shakespeare was famous for these things called soliloquies, in which the speaker talks out loud to himself, expressing his own internal motives or some confessing or confiding, all right, aloud his sort of deepest motives that other characters aren't exposed to. So this happens in soliloquies, and this happens in what they call asides, where the character says something that the other characters don't hear, but the audience hears. Okay, it's obviously unrealistic, but it's meant to build suspense, explore the interiority of the characters more fully, and famously in Othello, build dramatic irony, right, through the characterization of Iago, who destroys Othello, even though Othello believes Iago to be his close and dear friend. All right. So a little more about genre and style. Fifth, the play follows the structure of a classical tragedy. Okay, so if you've read Othello, or you've read Oedipus the King in ninth grade, in 10th grade, or you've read Ethan Frome this year, or you've read The Great Gatsby this year, then you are at least somewhat familiar with this genre of Western literature, which gives us, all right, a kind of play that dwells on some serious topic. All right, so it's not meant to be like funny. It's meant to be contemplative and to illustrate genuine suffering. All right, genuine crappiness. In which a flawed yet admirable or admirable protagonist is destroyed by a combination. And this is key, especially in Western literature, a combination of his own flaws, like mistakes that he makes, all right, or immoral or a incorrect value system, and also the overwhelming forces of the environment in which he lives. Okay, naturalist tragedies, like for instance Edith Wharton's Ethan Frome, emphasizes the environment as it de-emphasizes Frome's individual flaw, right, or flaws. But say Gadsby walks that line more as a tension. Lear is going to walk that line more as a tension. Okay, Oedipus the King famously establishes that tension between the two, the flaw and also the environment. Okay, that's an important point in tragedy. All right, so a tragedy, when properly performed, is meant to evoke a kind of purification. It's meant to put both the fictional characters and also the audience right, to put them back in order in some way. It's a movement from disorder to order through suffering. Okay, that is what a tragedy is at its core. It's a movement from misunderstanding to understanding through suffering, from disorder to order through suffering. And finally, this kind of protagonist is called a tragic hero. Okay, so you're familiar with this kind of character. He is admirable, he's powerful, and ruined by his hamartia, which is Greek for a mistake or a misstep or a misunderstanding during what we call the peripeteia, and that's the period in which the tragic hero is ruining his own life. All right, so Lear is going to ruin his own life during the peripeteia, and then he's confronted with reality in the anagnorisis. All right, and then finally purified along with the audience in the catharsis. Okay, so what's the title here? The title's King Lear. What does that do for us? What does it mean? Well, it just simply introduces our protagonist. It focuses our attention on his station in life. He's a king, and that suggests to us, since we know we're watching a tragedy, and it's about a king, that very much like Oedipus the king explores Oedipus's fall from a position of authority and power to powerlessness and humility. King Lear is also going to explore Lear's fall from power and authority to powerlessness and humility. Okay, that's a very common arc for a tragic hero. Move from power and authority to powerlessness and humility. Okay, what it means, what occasions that fall, is where the meat of the meaning of the play exists. Okay, so our central question is, how does Shakespeare use literary devices to develop the significance of Lear's fall from power? That just simply asks, what does his fall mean? Okay, what is being illustrated by Lear's fall? Answer to that question is a lot of stuff, and a lot of really good stuff to think about. All right, so that is our introductory lecture for Lear. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at Act 1 of the play, and we're just going to dive in to our analysis of Shakespeare's King Lear. Hope you guys have an excellent day.